Before there were three, Angel and Dante, the prequel to Out of Focus. Written by L.A. Witt. Narrated by Nick J. Russo. Part 1. Jordan. Chapter 1. Just think. Angel flopped down in his seat in the middle of our row in business class. We get to do this all over again on the way back. Fuck, Angel, Dante groaned as he settled into his own seat on the end. Don't put that evil on us. I stashed Dante's bag in the overhead compartment next to Angel's, and as I picked up my own, I said, It isn't over yet today. We still have to go through customs. Exhaling hard, Dante pinched the bridge of his nose. You two are just bright fucking rays of sunshine, aren't you? I laughed half-heartedly and closed the overhead bin. As I took my own seat to Angel's left, I said, Hey, at least we didn't miss our flight. He shot me a tired glare. That's setting a high bar. It won't be that bad. I paused to buckle my seatbelt and grinned. Besides, once we get there and we've all had a chance to sleep this off, I'm pretty sure I can unfuck your mood. Dante eyed me, and for a second, I thought he might be too annoyed to be placated by the promise of sex at the other end of this long flight. Slowly, though, he returned the grin. Okay, that's worth standing in line for customs. He paused, then pointed emphatically at Angel. You do not have anything to declare. Angel put up his hands. I didn't say a word. No, but I know you, and I'm pretty sure declaring I'm about to jam my dick down this guy's throat, he gestured to me, isn't exactly below you. I snickered. When Angel glared at me, I mirrored his innocent hands-up gesture. Hey, he said it, not me. Uh-huh, but you'll get punished for laughing. Damn it. Dante actually laughed, even if it was a bit half-hearted. Chuckling, Angel reached across the wide armrest between their seats to squeeze Dante's thigh. Dante put his hand over Angel's, and they exchanged tired smiles. Dante was obviously still not his usual self, though the snarky, if tired banter with Angel was encouraging. I doubted he'd be back to 100% until we'd made it across the ocean, through to London, through Heathrow Airport, past customs, and into our hotel. Probably not until he'd showered, napped, and then thoroughly fucked either my face or my ass. Honestly, I didn't blame him for being pissy. Literally, the only reason we'd made our flight at all was Angel's obsessive need to be at the airport painfully early. He was too anxious otherwise, though I had to admit he was better than he used to be. He'd been getting some help, and in the last couple of years, taking some meds to get a handle on his previously untreated anxiety and mild OCD, but there were some things that even pills and therapy couldn't touch. During his younger years, when he'd had to travel constantly for work, a couple of missed flights had done disastrous things to his itinerary, and to this day, if there was one thing Angel couldn't cope with, it was a botched schedule. So, in the name of keeping Angel's stress bearable, Dante and I were always happy to arrive at the airport long before we needed to. Today, thanks to nightmarishly long lines in security and Dante having to go aside for a private security check because something had caught a TSA dog's attention, we'd made the flight by the skin of our teeth. All because a couple of cat treats had wound up in Dante's bag, and apparently the dog had been hungry. Dante's obvious nerves around a large dog, especially a large dog that was suddenly very interested in him, hadn't helped ease anyone's suspicions. Awesome. We'd all been looking forward to this vacation for months, and now Angel's anxiety was cranked to 11, Dante was still pissed off, and I was exhausted. We were calmer now than we'd been before boarding, and Dante would probably sleep some of it off in the air, but I suspected we'd all be some degree of miserable for at least the next several hours. Hopefully, showering, sleeping, and fucking would turn us all around. No pressure or anything. Especially not for the submissive who wanted to make sure both his doms were happy and satisfied. Even now, I really wanted to do something to help both of them. Not necessarily sex, just something that would get us all out of our respective funks. Please, please don't let today set the tone for the entire trip. At least we'd be riding in comfort. Angel and Dante had both done ridiculous amounts of traveling, especially in their photojournalist days. Now they mostly traveled for pleasure, but they were still seriously good at finding the best deals on airfare, whether or not they dipped into their copious reserves of frequent flyer miles. It never ceased to amaze me that they could also, almost without fail, score us cheap upgrades. "If I'm going to be on a plane for that long," Angel had muttered while booking this trip, "I'm going to be comfortable, damn it." Not like I was going to argue. I was looking forward to this trip and our destination, but didn't relish that whole getting there thing. And he and Dante had tons of experience with spending long flights shoehorned into cattle class, according to Dante, or extended and unwanted group hug class, according to Angel. Business class it was, and thank God for that. I could only imagine the moods we'd all be in right now in sardine class, according to me. Eventually, the flight attendant shut the door, and while the plane taxied, they ran through the safety briefing. Then they collected the drinks from business class, pre-flight booze, hell yeah, and took their own seats. By the time we were in the air, Dante was out cold. Arms folded across his chest, his features more relaxed than they'd been all day. He looked far too peaceful for someone who'd been ready to lose his shit in security not very long ago. Between us, Angel had his eyes closed, but he was obviously awake, and there was nothing relaxed about his expression. Not when his jaw was working like that, or his brow was furrowed so hard it must have ached. His slow, measured breathing probably didn't register to anyone else, but I'd long ago learned what Dante had known for many years, how to recognize when Angel's anxiety was ratcheting up. I couldn't say for sure if it was flying that made him nervous, if he was still pulling himself together after the stress at the airport, or if any number of things had crept into his mind and sent his pulse soaring. He might have been worrying that we hadn't left enough food for the cat sitter to feed the cats, second-guessing if we'd locked the keys in his car in long-term parking, sweating over a benign noise during takeoff that could mean some freak mechanical failure was about to crash our plane. I reached across the wide armrests, slid my hand over the top of his, and gave it a gentle squeeze. I didn't ask if he was okay. That would just make his mental tailspin worse. He'd either tie himself into knots trying to convince me he was okay, or work himself into a fresh panic because maybe he wasn't. Eyes still closed, he turned his hand over under mine and laced our fingers together. His palm was sweaty. Not surprising. Little by little, the tension in his jaw and forehead eased. His breathing took on a more natural rhythm, and some tightness I hadn't even noticed in his neck and shoulders started to melt away. Around the time the plane stopped climbing and my ears stopped popping, Angel's eyes fluttered open. "Have I mentioned lately that I hate flying?" I chuckled, giving his hand another squeeze. Can't imagine anyone actually likes it. "Yeah, true." He turned toward Dante, and the remaining tension vanished as he smiled fondly at his longtime love. "Glad he's relaxed, though." "No kidding. Poor guy." Angel nodded, grimacing sympathetically. Dante was usually easygoing when he flew, but he'd been kind of getting it from all directions today. And now that I thought about it, that explained Angel's anxious moments during takeoff. As much as he tried not to depend on Dante to keep him on an even keel, the fact was, Dante did keep him on an even keel most of the time. I'd known almost immediately when I'd met them that Dante was the calmer, more laid-back half of the couple, and I'd always been amazed at how effortlessly he seemed to handle his high-strung partner. He didn't have to do anything. Dante could walk into a room, not even realizing that Angel was climbing the walls, and his presence would instantly have a visible effect on Angel. One look at Dante, and Angel would go from spooked horse to calm and bomb-proof. It was amazing to see. When Dante and I had finally convinced Angel to see a therapist, Angel had been afraid we were telling him we couldn't deal with his neurosis anymore. And Dante, in true Dante fashion, had taken his hand, looked in his eyes, and softly said, "This has nothing to do with us, Angel. It's not wearing us down. It's obviously wearing you down. We just want you to be happy." So Angel had gone, and the therapist had worked wonders, and between her and the meds, the difference had been night and day. But Angel was still Angel, and no amount of drugs, therapy, or support would ever make his anxiety magically go away. Throw him into a stressful situation, like, say, flying, and some panic was inevitable. Make that stressful situation get far enough under Dante's skin to crack his usual calm exterior, and it was a recipe for disaster. We'd all made it onto the plane, though. Dante was asleep, Angel was calm. I could breathe. By the time we landed on the other side, I had faith we'd be fine. Oblivious to my thoughts, Angel gazed fondly at Dante and said, "I still can't believe he's been putting up with me for 20 years. "Oh, come on. You're not that hard to live with." "But 20 years? Good point." "Hey, shut up," I snickered. "What? I'm just saying." "Uh-huh." He shot me a look that said if I didn't behave, I was going to pay for it later. That was a look I'd learned well over the last several years, and I was pretty sure he also knew I was weighing whether the punishment was much of a deterrent. It usually wasn't. Chuckling, Angel shook his head and squeezed my hand. "Jackass." I laughed too and glanced at Dante. 20 years, though. That's hard to imagine. "Tell me about it." From the wistful look in his eyes as he watched Dante sleeping, I suspected Angel was running through the last 2 decades in his mind. I knew their first few years had been spent apart more often than not, thanks to a long-distance relationship and jet-setting careers, but once they'd found their stride, they'd been all but joined at the hip. Once they traded their photojournalist careers for a joint business as professional photographers, their work and travel had been almost entirely together. That was how they'd been when I'd met them, and although I'd heard plenty of stories about their solo assignments all over the world, it was hard to imagine a time when they hadn't known each other, when they hadn't been the Angel and Dante I'd called my partners and doms for 8 amazing years. I ran my thumb alongside his hand. "You know, you guys have never really told me the whole story of how you got together." Angel turned to me and cocked his head. "Haven't we?" "Nope. I mean, I know it was in India, and Dante crashed into you while you were taking a picture of something, but was that it? And will telling me the whole story again keep you distracted from how anxious you still are? You just met, and here you are, 20 years later?" Angel's gaze drifted to Dante, and a dreamy smile slowly spread across his face. "No, it wasn't quite that simple. In fact, there were a few times I wasn't sure we'd be able to pull it off." I blinked. The thought of Angel and Dante being anything other than destined for each other didn't compute. "Yeah?" He nodded slowly. After another long look at the man who'd been by his side for 20 years, Angel settled back against his seat and stared ahead with unfocused eyes. "So when I was still working as a photojournalist, I was sent to Asia for a couple of assignments." Part 2. Angel. Chapter 2. Delhi, India, Spring 1999. The mid-afternoon sun was heating up the crowded bazaar, thickening the spicy air and slowing all the tourists to a crawl. The locals were used to it and rushed past like normal. The rest of us, lowly, perspiring foreigners, just tried to stay out of their way. I fussed with my camera strap. It was one of those wide straps that wouldn't cut into the back of my neck despite the weight of the bulky Nikon, but in this heat, it made me sweat. Or, well, it made me sweat more. Sweating was a foregone conclusion for anyone who was unaccustomed to the climate and ventured out into the heat from their air-conditioned hotel. As I strolled along a row of vendors, I couldn't even be annoyed with the dampness under my camera strap. I'd finished all the photography for my 2 assignments, one here in Delhi, one last week in Nepal. The images I needed were all on a couple dozen rolls of film tucked securely into my hotel safe, and now I had 6 days to kill. In theory, I should have been writing the accompanying articles, but as far as I was concerned, that was what evenings and the umpteen-hour-long flights home were for. So for today, I was playing tourist, spending some time in the various bazaars, maybe buying a few things for people back home, exploring some of the ruins and structures I hadn't seen on my last couple of trips to this region, sampling any of the local cuisine that didn't contain curry because holy fuck, I was tired of curry. And, naturally, I was taking photos at every turn. Without the pressure to find something poignant and profound for an article, I could shoot what I wanted. Not that I ever didn't shoot what I wanted. The editor who'd contracted me for this would be less than impressed if he knew just how many frames, hell, entire rolls of film, I'd blown on a monkey and a couple of birds yesterday when I was supposed to be taking photos to accompany my article on the local economy, which I had done, but there'd been a monkey and a couple of interesting birds, so today I could shoot anything and everything I wanted, guilt-free. Between a stall selling sarongs and one with some small religious items, I paused to replace the film to my camera. I loaded the new roll, then dropped the used one into the side pouch on my backpack, where it would be kept cool by a small ice pack. I glanced at my cache of unused rolls, which was shrinking by the day. Just as well my trip was nearly over. I'd already shipped a number of rolls back to the States for my assistant to start developing, and I was getting low on unused ones. It was enough to get through the week as long as I was conservative with it. Yeah, right. If I ran out, which I probably would, I'd either have to hang up the camera or resort to buying cheap Kodak out in town. God, I couldn't wait until digital inevitably took over. My assistant and several colleagues didn't believe it would ever happen, but I held out hope. If nothing else, it would lighten the hell out of my luggage and make me freak out less about the X-ray machines at the airport. I didn't care how safe it was supposed to be. I quietly panicked every time my bags went through the machine and kept right on quietly panicking until my assistant or I eventually processed the film and confirmed it hadn't been damaged. For now, though, I was stuck with film, and with a fresh roll loaded in my camera, I continued through the bazaar. In no hurry at all, I checked out stalls of clothes, jewelry, spices, and trinkets. Though the sun was brutal right now and not terribly conducive to quality photos of people or buildings, it did create some interesting shadows for some macro shots. And filtered through a few brightly colored clothes hanging above one particular stall, it cast soft reds, oranges, and purples onto a stack of otherwise plainly colored baskets in the next stall. In my very limited Hindi, I asked the middle-aged woman behind the table if I could photograph her baskets. She nodded, but her scowl told me to hurry the hell up unless I planned to buy something. I took off my lens cap and crouched in front of the row of baskets. Question was, shallow depth of field or no? I played with the aperture, trying to decide which created a more striking image in this case. Focusing sharply on one red light-stained basket with the others blurred in the background looked cool as hell, so shit! Was my only warning before I was knocked sideways. I tucked my camera against my chest and twisted so I'd land on my shoulder, and I hit the ground with a grunt just as some asshole tumbled over the top of me. Stupid fucking tourist! We barely landed before he scrambled up and offered me a hand. Oh my God, I am so sorry. Are you okay? I'm fine. And hey, at least he spoke English. In fact, he sounded American, so he'd understand me when I ripped into him. We both stood, and I gritted my teeth as I checked my camera to make sure it wasn't damaged, then dusted myself off. You okay? He asked again. I turned to him, ready to let fly something snide about watching where he was going, unless he actually wanted to cough up a couple grand to buy me a new camera, but I froze. The first thing I noticed was his camera. Not too many tourists lugged around bulky, not to mention expensive, medium-format Hasselblads. That was the kind of rig reserved for either the extremely rich and supremely stupid who were just asking to be robbed, or professionals like me who were also asking to be robbed but had legitimate reasons for choosing high-end equipment. I lifted my gaze a little higher. Jesus, The Hasselblad almost vanished from my mind when I met his piercing blue eyes. It's illegal to be gay in India, Ryan. A friend had emphatically reminded me a dozen times en route to the airport. Would you please be careful this time? I gulped. I was always careful. Well, except for that one time in Alabama when I'd forgotten where I was, and anyway, I was always careful now. But right then, standing there in the middle of a scorching hot and thickly crowded bazaar, staring into the most gorgeous eyes I'd ever seen as I faced a man with playfully arranged brown hair with the faintest coppery highlights. Oh, I was definitely gay in India. And he'd asked me a question. I cleared my throat, adjusting my camera on its strap just for something to do. Yeah, I'm fine. I shifted my weight. You? Are you okay? Oh, yeah. He waved a hand, then dusted off the sleeve of his button-up white shirt. I'm good. And I'm really sorry. I was trying to get a wide angle of the road and... Scowling, he gestured toward the bustling street. I'm sorry. I should have been paying attention. Less than 2 minutes ago, I'd been in a state of mind where my response would have been, yeah, you should have, asshole. But that was before I saw his camera and his eyes, and now that I really looked at him, he was a little taller than me, slim, long fingers cradling the Hasselblad's lens, thin lips curving into a faint smile. I was staring, wasn't I? And so was he. When our eyes met, they locked, and he didn't look away. Neither did I. It was only after I realized just how long the moment had gone on without either of us speaking that I cleared my throat again and broke eye contact. He coughed too. So you're a photographer? I nodded. Yeah. I glanced at his camera. Obviously, you are too. Yeah. He chuckled, gesturing with the beast around his neck. I normally don't travel with this bad boy, but my Nikon had a bit of a mishap. What kind of mishap? Let's just say I don't recommend getting too close when you're covering a riot. I laughed. Oh, I've had the pleasure. His eyebrows jumped. Have you? Mm-hmm. I stepped aside to let a family pass, then gestured for this stranger to move with me so we weren't blocking the basket seller. Safely between two booths, I said, I've done a few assignments in political hot zones. I've had lens shattered, film stolen, film confiscated. Occupational hazard, right? He grimaced. Very much so. Then he extended his hand, still keeping the other on the camera as if he were afraid someone would steal it right off his neck at any moment. By the way, I'm Dante. I shook his hand. Ryan. I too held on to my camera. It wasn't as conspicuous as his, but I'd actually had cameras stolen before and didn't want to encourage the practice. So, is this a vacation? He asked. Or are you here for work? A little of both. I wrapped up my assignment yesterday, so I'm relaxing today. He nodded toward my camera. By working, right? Guilty. What about you? About the same, actually. I shot what I came to shoot, but I also want to load up on stock photos while I'm here. That's a hell of a camera for stock photos. Dante laughed, adjusting the strap on his neck. Like I said, the Nikon had a mishap. Otherwise, I don't usually travel with this beast. I love the image quality, but if it gets stolen... He grimaced again. It's insured, right? Of course. He snorted. I may not watch where I'm walking, but I'm not that much of an idiot. I chuckled. Just checking. Well, as long as you're here with a camera like that, you really should check out the Chatterpur Temple, especially around sunset. His eyebrows rose. Oh, yeah? Yeah, it's gorgeous. I've probably taken more shots there than I have at the Taj Mahal. I paused. Not that I've taken much at the Taj Mahal, but... You don't like the Taj Mahal? Oh, I do, but it's so iconic that it's hard to get a shot that hasn't been taken 1,000,000 times already. Dante flashed a grin. I've always enjoyed the challenge myself. Sure, me too, but not when I'm trying to find that undiscovered shot while a million tourists are blocking me and crashing into me. He laughed, then cleared his throat. Sounds like you're a bit of a magnet for tourists crashing into you. Uh-huh, I kinda am, aren't I? Our eyes met, and we both chuckled. He started to say something, but right at that moment, as if on cue, I was knocked off balance for the second goddamned time today. Fortunately, Dante was quick, and he caught me before I took a knee. You okay? He asked, still holding onto my shoulder. Yeah. I righted myself and glanced at the guy who'd crashed into me, but he didn't look back. Guess I'm in everybody's way today. Dante's cheeks colored. Well, to be fair, I wasn't watching where I was going. That turned out all right. Yeah. He smiled a little, turning my knees to water. It did, didn't it? I returned the smile, and for a moment, we stood in silence that was equal parts friendly and awkward. I was well known amongst my social circles for being snide and sarcastic with no internal censor, but Dante had caught me off guard, literally and figuratively. I wasn't sure what to say without scaring him off, because I kind of had a talent for doing that, and for reasons I couldn't quite nail down, I wasn't ready for him to suddenly disappear into the crowd. Shifting his weight, he glanced around, and I thought quickly, searching for something to say to keep him here when I was almost certain he was about to bow out. He spoke first, though. So, I'm on my way down to the Lotus Temple after this? Gesturing in what I assumed was the temple's general direction, he held my gaze without flinching, even though his tone was a little shy. You're welcome to come along. If I'd had other plans for the day, assignment or no assignment, they evaporated right then and there. Smiling, I nodded. Sure, let's go.